How would you know whether or not floods can occur where you live? In this Keeping It Green segment, Ean Wallace speaks to a disaster resilience expert about mapping floods.
Heavy rainfall is a hazard that only leads to a flooding disaster when it affects people. You could have had floods occurring historically in an area, but once people move in, only then do floods become disastrous. According to the UN, disaster risk is expressed as the likelihood of loss of life, injury or destruction and damage from a disaster in a given period of time. It is the combined effects of hazards, the assets or people exposed to the hazard, and the vulnerability of those exposed. If heavy rainfall occurs in an area of no exposure, then there is no flood risk. So how would you know whether or not flooding can occur, or how likely is it to occur? Dr. Ronald Roopnarine is a disaster resilience expert at the University of the West Indies.
When you're looking at risk, you have to first look at susceptibility in terms of the likelihood or physical likelihood of something, of a hazard occurring, right? So it's called susceptibility or hazard mapping. No, this is telling you that it's more susceptible based on the fact that the causation factors or the factors that lead to flooding, when you combine all of them, it's telling you that here is more likely to flood.
And the next step finds out who and what can be affected by floods. This is the human dimension of disasters known as vulnerability, one of the defining components of disaster risk.
Because if you're trying to work out risk, you have to look at susceptibility combined with vulnerability. This here is where you look at the vulnerability, and this is where you look at the vulnerable areas based on the building, population and roads.
By checking these theoretical models of flood hazard and vulnerability against actual events in an area, experts can then work out flood risk.
If you really to compare this to what has been happening, you would see that it's fairly accurate in that regard.
Disaster risk is ultimately the result of decisions that we make about where to build and how society protects vulnerable people and assets. I'm Ean Wallace, keeping it green for TDT News.
I love the look and smell of litter. From this huge pile, I can see that many people also find it attractive.
Yes, Charlie. Litter is indeed attractive. It attracts roaches, flies and mosquitoes, and rats.
My pets.
Don't be a litter bug, Charlie. Do the right thing. Don't litter.